How's this for a tough job? He's an ethics reform guy in Springfield. He's a state rep out of Naperville, and he has some big ideas about ethics and about the state budget, and he's going to share some of them with us. Representative Grant Wehrli, how are you? Thanks.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here because, you hear about everything going on in Springfield, and we hear that ethics committee has been formed and that there are things going on, and it sounds as if you're making that a priority when you're down there. You were formerly in Naperville City Council for a long time, and you were balancing budgets there, and you were looking at ethics and things like that. And now at Springfield, you've got your work cut out for you.
That is absolutely correct. Right now, most people in Illinois do not trust state government because they can't follow state government. Our processes are not clear when we're talking about anything from ethics to a certified financial audit. We just don't provide transparency to billions of taxpayer dollars, and that's something that I'm working hard on. Partner that with the corruption that's going on, the massive federal investigation. It's about time that some of these things get exposed for what they are.
Do you feel because of that federal investigation that's going on, do you feel that are things a little bit different in Springfield? Are people more motivated to get real ethics reform done, or is it sort of like let's wait and see who gets caught up in this whole thing first?
Well, I look forward to finding out what real ethics reform looks like. One of the upsides to the feds coming in, and sadly it takes a federal investigation, is at least now we're having the conversation. I've been down there for 6 years pushing on this, and until the feds came in, it was really just stonewalled silence. Status quo is okay, everything's fine, but now people are starting to see that
it's not fine.
No, it's not fine, and our budgets are a mess, and there's things buried in the budget and that benefit certain districts over others, and it's the whole process that in the city of Naperville, we took 10 months to do our budget, and it's a substantial city with a sizable budget. The budget was balanced. It was public for all to see, and we had a deliberative process. We had open meetings on it. And in Springfield, just the opposite happens. The governor just had his budget address, which is great, but now we will not see the actual budget until May 30th or 31st, and we adjourn on May 31st.
You won't see it? You have not seen it?
We will not see an actual budget. We will have appropriations hearings, but there will not be any numbers discussed. It will just be why we can't cut this and why we can't cut that and why we need to spend more here. But we will not talk about dollars and cents at all.
Well, that seems messed up.
It absolutely is. We should see the budget as soon after the governor introduces his. The Speaker Madigan should come forth with his, and we should be able to deliberate on these line items in the budget. And that is a process that does not happen in Springfield.
So the Republican caucus has come out with a message about this, and you're part of that. And it says at current rates, state tax revenues just won't grow enough to overtake spending ever. It's a powerful statement to make that says to me that there needs to be some sort of change, some changes discussed, amendments made even. I don't know, but this isn't. We're not heading toward the right space.
Correct. Even with Governor Pritzker's graduated income tax, our spending will still outpace what we take in. And I did not vote in favor of that. I think the graduated income tax is the wrong way to go. Instead, we need to look at the reforms. Now, when we talk about pensions in Illinois, they take up about 25% of our budget, far outpacing any other state. But the Constitution has been clear and the courts have been clear that we cannot do anything currently. But you cannot articulate a position, at least that makes cogent sense to me, that a teacher that has earned a pension spike 4 years from now, we can't change that. On a go-forward basis, I absolutely think there are some common-sense pension reforms, things that we can do, not to take away their pensions, because I do believe people want the best police, fire, teachers that they can afford. But it has to be sustainable. So on a go-forward basis, we need serious structural change.
We had Chicago Tribune's and WGN Radio's Rick Pearson on Friday, and he was saying we've already made some reforms to the pensions going forward. What are they? Are they enough?
No, they're not enough. But one of the things we did pass was a pension buyout program to where you'll get a certain amount on the dollar. You'll get a lump sum payment, and then you will forego any pension increases going forward. So there are things that we can do, and that is absolutely a step in the right direction. But we need to make greater strides towards reform that makes it fiscally sustainable.
What would be your one or two things if you said, hey, these are two things I'd love to get passed, and these are what I would put on the table right now?
Well, great question. Two things I've been working on is double dipping, which is one, and then the other one is, as I mentioned earlier, on the go-forward basis. You have not earned a pension spike or a pension increase 7 years from now. So on a go-forward basis, we need to change that. But one of the pieces I passed and was signed into law was ends the practice of what's known as double dipping. You retire on a Friday as a police captain, and then on Monday you start a new job as a police chief, collect the pension from the first one, all while accruing a second pension. Under the piece of legislation that is now law for police chiefs, it means that police chief can get a defined contribution, but he cannot get a defined benefit plan. So it takes away the cost of the carry of that pension as far as reliance 100% on the taxpayer.
Mm-hmm. So moving forward, they couldn't do that if this kind of thing was passed.
Correct.
That would be outlawed.
Correct.
And the other thing you've talked about, and we just saw this with Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago City budgeting when she took over. Immediately, we thought, well, how is she going to pass this? She got $838 million budget shortfall. How is that going to work? Where is she going to find the money? And one of the ways she found a little bit more than $150 million was through this zero budget balancing, where she went zero-based budgeting. And she went through and basically asked every department across the board to say, hey, we're zeroing you out, and just explain to us what you need and what you need it for, and we'll build up the budget that way rather than taking what's already there and then explaining what we're going to add to it. And that seemed to work for the city, at least to that extent. And now you're suggesting that. Well, why don't we do that in Springfield?
Because the powers that be, that they don't want that. So this is something that you see now working in Chicago. It's something that we instituted in Naperville that works. So in Naperville, we did it every 3 years. We'd have whatever department, Public Works, come in and say, all right, this year you get nothing. Build us the case financially why you need these dollars. Now, let's look at DCFS, which sadly has been in the news way too much lately here in Illinois. Over $1 billion budget. They do great work there. But they should come in and say, okay, this is what's working, this is what isn't working, and then build their case up, and then actually budget for results, not budget for past practices.
Mm-hmm. And eliminate positions that are not filled and things like that, rather than keep them in the budget. Even if it did pass, what would you say the change? Well, how much it would save? What would be your estimate, or would you even have a guesstimate on that kind of thing?
I wouldn't even know where to start on a guesstimate, because it's when we're talking $1 billion, there's a lot going on there. But let's look at the motor vehicle license plate thing that we were just taking up in Springfield. What we found in that piece of legislation was $10 million towards one district, and it happens to be the 21st legislative district down on the south side near Midway. I'll give you one guess as to who district that is. $10 million earmarked through IDOT for that district alone. So there's things baked into these budgets that we don't get the process to expose during the budget process, and then they're just signed into law, and then there they are in perpetuity. So I can't tell you how much is already baked into the cake here, so to speak.
Illinois State Representative Grant Wehrli is here with us. He's trying to change things in Springfield, and that is not an easy task. It's not an easy thing to do. How do you do it? How do you get these kinds of things? You're a fighter. You're going after it. You think that these are common sense things that will help our state, and I imagine you do it for all the right reasons, that all of us who live in this great state or the city, we love it here. We want it to be sustainable for the future in terms of our budget for our kids and our grandkids, and things to improve for the future, and we're not on that path.
No, we're not, but it's persistence, and my wife and I are proud parents of 2 boys. And we want them to have the same things that we were afforded growing up in this great state in the city of Naperville. And right now, Springfield is doing pretty much, in my opinion, everything they can to have those boys move out of state. We hear about this out-migration. We're going to lose 1 congressional seat. And when the best story you can say is grow up here, get a great education, and then move out of state, I'm working hard every day to change that. Mm-hmm. We have so much going for us as a state. We have this wonderful city of Chicago, all the fresh water we could need. There's so much high-educated workforce here. There's so much going for
and architecture and restaurants, and still a relatively affordable cost of living. When you look at major big cities like New York and San Francisco, we're nowhere close, and hopefully the property taxes will help us not get closer to that.
Right. So if we can get government under control, we have a lot going on here, a lot of good stuff going on here. So it's just trying to get, people don't mind paying taxes when they get good services for it.
When you talk to Speaker Madigan or some of the Democrats in Springfield, what kind of reaction are you getting to all of this?
Well, first off, Speaker Madigan doesn't talk with pretty much anyone.
I was going to guess that.
I was
just wondering, throwing it out there just in case you were one of those people maybe on that list.
No. So they're not really focused on the long term, and that's something that I'm trying to change as well. We govern from crisis to crisis, and we shouldn't be doing that. We should have a long-term plan, and it took us decades to get into this fiscal mess. It'll take us a decade at least to get out, and we can only do that if we can agree on a common plan, a financial plan, and then implement it. My concern with that is we would start to see some success, and then the powers that be say, oh, everything's fine, let's go back to our old ways. So the state has never really had fiscal discipline, and that's what it's going to take to get us out of this mess.
All right, Representative Grant Wehrli is here with us. Can you stick around here for a few minutes? We want to talk to you about the license plate fee for small trailers, because you're trying to do something about that. That went up 555% overnight, and people were like, what? I just have a little trailer. I'm just going to haul my little stuff, and I have to pay what? So that's something that's on your radar. And then the electric vehicles and the so-called vanity plates. Veterans have come forward to your office and said, what? This isn't fair either. I just want my veteran plate, and I'm not allowed to have it because I have an electric vehicle. All of this is stuff you're trying to sort out. We'll be back with Representative Wehrli here on WGN in a minute. 1:45 this Monday. Anna here, Anna Davlantes here on WGN. We're here with Illinois State Representative Grant Wehrli. He is fighting corruption in Springfield, and that is a tremendously hard job. So we wish you the best with that, and you're also fighting for ethics reform. Grant, we were talking about zero-based budgeting is something you'd like to see. We've been talking about just ethics reform in general and the kinds of things you're fighting for the future, for the state. And hopefully we'll gain some momentum with some of these kinds of initiatives. So far, how's it looking?
Well, so I continue to remain an optimist, which for somebody in my position is somewhat of a challenge, but I have to believe that the better days are still ahead of us, that we can be so much better as a state, and I'm going to continue to strive for that.
Yeah. Well, we wish you well with all that, because it sounds as if some of the things you're talking about just make a lot of sense and could be good for the state. At least they certainly should be up for discussion, and currently are not. But you're pushing for that, so you'll have to keep us posted on your efforts. But I want to turn to some other things, because as always, we've got a couple of things buried in legislation that come to light and just don't make sense. And one example of that is something that made news recently about the plate fee, the license plate fee for small trailers. Okay, so all the license plate fees went up. Some of them went up just a few dollars or a small percentage. But if you have one of these really small trailers, it went up 555%. So like from $18 to $118 just to have a trailer to pull like really small stuff.
Right. So if you're towing your ATV up to Wisconsin for the weekend, or your personal watercraft boat, things like that, it's a $118 fee now, which is ridiculous. Some people only use this trailer literally twice a year. And this is one of the things that was buried in the infrastructure bill. Now, we need to pay for infrastructure. I totally understand that. But to punish small business owners, mom and pop shops, and parents, quite honestly, or anyone pulling a trailer with this kind of fee is ridiculous. Now, the penalty for not following this registration, and I'm not going to advocate that anybody break the law, is $75. Oh. So you pay $118, you're fine, or you can chance it and maybe only get caught and pay a $75 fee. So this was something that was in the infrastructure bill that we had very little time to review, literally a couple of hours at most, and then have to come out and vote on this. So these are the types of things that we need more transparency on. Could we have stopped this earlier? Yes. Now my concern is, and I do have I'm a sponsor of a bill that will undo this, it's $40 million of revenue to the state with this increase that we may not see because people may not pay it. But if we, that money for all practical purposes may already be spent. And that's unfortunate.
So they basically just kind of put the budget on your plate suddenly, and you didn't get a chance to go into all these details, but then constituents come forward and say, whoa, what's going on over here?
Correct. Right. So another example, and you mentioned it briefly, is if you own an electric vehicle and you're a veteran, you can get your veteran tag. And that's, listen, I have nothing but respect for everybody that serves. We should do more than we already are doing for vets. But right now they can't get a veteran's tag. Now, myself and a Democratic rep, we are working collaboratively to fix this. So this is something that I do think we can get a fix for. This was basically a Scrivener's error in the legislative process. So this should get fixed in this spring session. I remain an optimist on that piece of legislation.
You do think that? Okay, so the electric vehicles, basically, they're saying you can't have vanity plates. Vanity plates is sort of a misnomer because it's basically any of those plates that are not the original Illinois plates, the standard Illinois plate. It could be for a cancer foundation. It could be for a team like the Blackhawks or the White Sox. It could be for a veterans group, or it could be Marines or Army or something like that. Yes. And it doesn't seem right that if you own an electric vehicle and you're a veteran, or you want to have, Chicago Police Memorial Fund on your plate, that wouldn't be allowed. Is that one just also an oversight?
So this is what happens when we rush things. this is a function of the process down there, that it is, okay, who needs what? We get it drafted in a bill. Literally, the drafting happens in a 48-hour window. We as legislators get a de minimis amount of time to review it, and then mistakes happen. We're all human, so some mistakes are okay. But this is sort of pandemic in Springfield. It's a rush at the end to get everything done. Right now, we're just about to start March. We haven't even talked about the budget in any manner at all, and we won't until the end of May, and that's by design. It's the Speaker wants people in the House not to do anything. We have this perception of being busy, but then all of a sudden, the last week of May, before everybody wants to get out of Springfield, is when all the heavy lifting is going to occur. That's completely backwards, and that's why we get the results we get.
630 says, why are we complaining about just these small trailers? It's how many people are really affected. I think the point you're making is that you should be able to go through a budget and make sensible decisions, and there should be more of a back and forth. That seems to make sense. I think that's a very sensible thing to expect, and instead you're just getting this dumped on your desk hours before you got to vote, and then there's all this stuff in it that's like, what?
Correct. And that's just one example. Who knows what else we're going to find in these budgets and in large expenditures of money.
Right. Still to come, still to be revealed. 630, the small trailer fee will really hurt Scout troops. We had a trailer with canoes and the other camp gear. No way we could have afforded that kind of increase. That's what you don't want to see.
Right. And then the people that live in Southern Illinois, in Kentucky, there are no trailer registration fees at all. So, they're going to tow it across the river and just leave it there and hope they don't get caught.
Right. And this isn't like a large caravan that you're able to haul with these things. They're very small tows, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's one of I mean, I get why you're looking at it. And the electric vehicles, too. It seems people are on board with that one, with the veterans being able to have their plates. Is that coming back?
I would not want to be someone that would tell veterans no.
I know, that would be a hard thing, a really hard thing. The other thing about the budget that just came up when we were talking to WGN TV's political reporter and anchor, Taman Bradley, is this whole idea that the budget, it was released on the same day that Blagojevich was ultimately released, so a lot of people were sort of paying attention to other things and not necessarily at the budget and learning about the details that really affect us. I mean, let's face it, they really do. But so when that came out, one of the things that was really clear and really was the headline that was overlooked is this idea that balancing this budget the way it is now, even money for education, relies on voters in November passing this referendum, right, for the graduated income tax. If that doesn't pass, the budget really kind of collapses under the weight of that.
So then tough decisions have to be made, and those are the tough decisions that we should have been making up until this point. So if you look historically at Illinois' budget, we just cobble on more spending, and we never do anything on the reform side. We never look at programs and their effectiveness. We never make sure that our intended outcomes are being reached. So instead of just saying, hey, we need more money, we need to do work, the due diligence on the expense side first. So I kind of, when the governor said that if you don't do this, we're going to have to make serious cuts and reforms, I look at that as a positive, to be honest. We need to scrub state budget
line items.
Item after line item, correct.
Well, but I guess the issue there that gets kind of scary is the funding cuts to education. That would that have to happen? The way it seems as if they're budgeting it based on that passing, and the dollars are going to come from that particular tax, is the way it's being portrayed. Is that right?
Well, that's how the governor wants you to believe it, but I also think that is he's holding the budget hostage. If you don't do this, then this. Instead, let's have the conversation, because we are at record high revenues in the state of Illinois. Our national economy is booming. We see unemployment at historic lows. We see wages rising, and yet Illinois still cannot make ends meet with current revenues. It's always, if you just give us Springfield politicians more money, we promise we'll do a better job with it this time. I don't think handing a blank check over to politicians in Springfield is the way to go. You need to hold us accountable. You need to make sure that we're doing our jobs in an ethical manner, in a transparent manner, and then we will budget for results.
It does seem as if when times are good, this is the time to sort of figure out, moving forward, because we're already not in great shape. From a budget perspective and a tax perspective. So if things should maybe not be so great a few years from now, that kind of compounds the whole problem.
Right. Illinois was slow in coming out of the last recession. And at the next recession, it's not a question of if, it's when. Illinois is not well prepared from a budget standpoint to handle the next downturn. So we need to be taking a forward-looking vision at that. Once again, budgeting for more than just this year. A 2-year budget, once we can get to a budget process that's that works for all, a 2-year budget would be a great thing for the state of Illinois.
All right, I want to ask you about Rod Blagojevich. He made some news again over the weekend. Did you see his interview with Anderson Cooper?
Oh, boy, I did. In his interview on the day he was released in Chicago, I thought after every other line it was going to be live from New York at Saturday night.
You really thought? He was quoting scripture. He was quoting poetry. He was a political prisoner. There was a lot of material there for people to talk about, but when Anderson Cooper was asking him over the weekend, did an interview with him, I think Friday night, Anderson lost his cool when the former governor, Rod Blagojevich, basically said that he called himself and he thinks of himself as a political prisoner.
I am a political prisoner. I was put in prison for practicing.
Wait a minute, you're a political
politics.
prisoner? Nelson Mandela was a political prisoner. Political prisoners have no due process and are unjustly jailed. You had a jury convict you. You had appeals courts look at your sentencing, and you even appealed to the Supreme Court twice, and they refused to hear you. So you're hardly a political prisoner.
Well, first of all, Nelson Mandela went to before a court. He was convicted in a court of law. I had nearly 8 years to read books.
Right, by a racist apartheid government.
Now, I'm not complaining that I'm not in the Senate, but I am complaining that I was sent to prison by a handful of corrupt prosecutors who are abusing their power. They're uncontrolled, and they're the ones that Chief Justice Breyer talked about when he said that our country is in trouble because of these uncontrolled prosecutors who can do just about anything they want to do.
Prosecutors are important in our system, and you are going after the very basis of our justice system, which has plenty of problems. But part of the thing is you got out. You do have an obligation to at least admit what you did wrong, and you refuse to do that, and you're creating a whole new alternate universe of facts. And that may be big in politics today, but it's still, frankly, just bull.
Yeah, he kind of lost it there because he just wasn't liking what he was hearing from Rod Blagojevich. A story in the Tribune today about how Illinois Republicans plan to campaign on corruption and fight corruption, and that's part of what you do. But then, does the president's letting him out complicate things at all?
I'm not going to say it's going to complicate things, but it's certainly inappropriate for the state of Illinois to sort of lessen the impact on convicted public officials. Mm-hmm. It sends the wrong message at the wrong time. I applaud what the FBI, IRS are doing in the state of Illinois, and we need more of that. But if people aren't going to be held accountable, either by law enforcement, sadly in Illinois, or by the voters, which should be holding us accountable, then you get the government you deserve.
Yeah, and so your reaction when you hear all that with Rod, but he is still speaking out. I think a lot of people were saying, will he retreat for a month and sort of decide next steps? But he's been giving a number of interviews.
There
still
are
doing it.
A lot of big egos in state politics in Illinois, and none bigger than Rod Blagojevich.
Not the last we were going to hear from him, that's for sure.
Sadly, no.
There is something else going on in your neck of the woods I just want to end with, and this is nothing of your doing or any connection, but it's a story that's making news. It's about Airbnb and that big party in Naperville. 150 party guests, trash a house, and go crazy. It sort of shines a spotlight on these kinds of Airbnb rentals when they're misused. I don't think any owner hopes and wishes that when they rent out their property, somebody's going to throw a ginormous bash there and ruin it, but it does happen, and this was a bad case of it.
It was. Naperville likes a good celebration, but this one was a way out of bounds. So this is something that we need to look at from a local zoning and ordinance standpoint, as well as at the state level, what we can do to hold these places a little bit more accountable.
What are the rules right now in Naperville, just for example? It's just you're kind of probably dealing with it just like Chicago is, trying to change them all the time. Every time something comes up and you see, whoa, that shouldn't happen. This is not going well. Because I know neighbors do complain when there are these big parties going on, and hard within the system of just these rental sites to prohibit it or stop it.
Right. Well, it's sound ordinances, things like that, parking. But we'll have to take a look and see what we can do to address this.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. Representative Grant Wehrli, he is an Illinois state rep representing the 41st District out of Naperville and fighting for ethics and reform and against corruption. And we wish you the best of luck on those fronts. Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you.
Good to see you. More to come here on WGN.